Okay, guys, welcome back to Investor Army Podcast. Today we have Adam Adams on the show. We're going to talk about how real estate is going in Denver, Colorado. We're going to talk about hard money lending and a little bit about how he's working together with his team to buy apartment complexes with Blue Spruce Holdings. How you doing, Adam?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Doing good, man. Welcome on the show. It's
Thanks
kind
for
of
having me.
Yeah. I mean, y'all are in a unique market. I know a few people up there in Colorado, and it's absolutely exploding. So
Right.
let's talk a little bit about that. How'd y'all kind of get into it? Y'all always been in Denver, or y'all just move into that market, or
Oh, well, so we're not buying apartments in Denver right now. I mean, it's not that we're not doing it. It's just we're not finding deals.
Yep.
So we have a couple of guys who mostly just do acquisitions, and each of them have four different states. So we're looking actually in Texas a little bit. We've got a 56 unit that we're working on in Corpus Christi area right now, and then that one's under contract. But we have a few others that we're looking at, like through Dallas Fort Worth and Houston as well.
Okay, so y'all come from the finance world a little bit, right? Y'all are in hard money loans, or how are y'all working together? I know you created a little team. How do you plan to financially take down this type of property?
Okay, so well, we're syndicators. So you know, we got our education through a group out in Boston, Dave Lindahl's group.
Yep.
It's RE Mentor, and we were friends through a few other groups, Dale Walmsley's group, Brad Sumrock's group. We brought a guy out on our podcast who's really, really awesome, Rod Cleef. We're working on getting Michael Blanc on. So just a few like apartment investors. We're trying to really network, and the podcast helps a lot.
Yeah,
so we have a podcast too. We didn't have a chance to really mention it yet, but we actually just recorded you on our podcast that should be airing about 3 weeks from the record date. So we'll definitely holler at you and let you drop it to your people if you want to.
Okay, go ahead and give them the name of your podcast and send them on over there.
Okay.
Yep.
So depending on what's easier for your listeners, the website is Real Blue Spruce, real like real estate, blue spruce like the tree, BLUESPRUCE.com. So that will take you right to it. But if you'd rather type in the whole podcast name, it's just The Creative Real Estate Podcast. And then, you can find it also by Real Blue Spruce, but The Creative Real Estate Podcast is the one that has a little tree in the middle of a house.
Okay, guys, go check it out and leave a 5-star review over there. Now, so you've teamed up, you're using your podcast, you're using social media to branch out across the country to find people to network with, because, if you're staying in your local market and you can't meet everybody, you're limiting yourself in a small area. So you're working with people around the country, but you're also looking around the country. What made you kind of look in Texas?
Well, the main thing about Texas is you guys are giant. Yeah. We find more deals from Texas than we find throughout the entire rest of the country put together. So just this month, in probably the last 4 weeks, we've put in LOIs, which is the equivalent of an offer. We put in offers on well over 7,000 units.
Wow.
Well over 7,000 units just in Texas. All combined with everything else, we've probably put in, 6,000 or 7,000. So Texas is just huge. That you guys have more apartments than anybody else has. The landlord laws are very, very friendly.
Yep.
You've experienced tons of appreciation recently and have good upside potential to go forward, which basically means this is a great time for your sellers to sell, which is what they're doing, because they know that they're making, doubling, tripling their money by selling now, and they're leaving a little bit of skin on the bone, which is awesome. So that's the main reason for Texas.
Okay, are y'all staying primarily in the bigger cities, or y'all going out into the kind of secondary and tertiary markets, or kind of what's like the main focus?
No, absolutely. So the one that we're working on now is a tertiary market. It's outside of Corpus Christi, not too far from. Oh, geez, you had to put me on the spot.
Well, there's lots of little towns outside there.
Yeah, yeah.
So like what type of what is like the focus? You're looking at, any size property, or what type of rent ranges are you kind of trying to focus on? What do you think is a big opportunity right now?
Okay, so this is great for your listeners. Anybody who's getting into syndications, a little short education on how to do the syndications. One thing is, me personally, I'm a partner on 26 doors so far. So that's like 3 small apartment buildings that we bought this year, a few houses that we bought this year, a few houses that we bought last year. Altogether, I think it's 21 or 26 units. Well, some of them are flips. So I think it's 26 units. A couple of them are flips. But so basically what I'm saying is it's real hard to qualify for a loan by myself if I'm not a multimillionaire, if I don't own, 200 doors already. And so the point is that when you're doing syndications, you use something called a sponsor. A sponsor is just a partner that currently has liquid assets, above 4 million or above 6 million. And they also have a portfolio currently of 100, 200, 700, 2,600 doors. In addition, they have just the experience of being on that side of the ownership. They've managed the properties. And so the person lending the money, the bank or other financial institution, feels much, much better about giving that money up to me if I have, a partner with all of that experience and money and everything else. So what I'm saying is basically our main focus is 50 units and up to 175 units. However, a couple of our sponsors are looking for like 300 doors. So if we find something that meets with what our sponsor wants, what my sponsors are looking for, and we have dozens and dozens of these sponsors that, we are working with. So if we see something, we know that it fits for their criteria, we'll just put in an LOI or an offer on it and just get a hold of the sponsor and let them know, hey, we've got a deal that works for you. But in general, bigger players work on that stuff that's above 200 doors. So we stay between 50 to 175.
Yeah, you got to get enough units to get that scales of economy or economies of scale trying to kick in there. So when you're looking at these properties and you get, let's say, an offer accepted, it's a little bit different than a single family, right? When you do the inspection and the whole process, because it takes a lot more due diligence, a lot longer time. Can you kind of walk through that process a little bit and kind of share with our listeners?
Yeah, and there's more than one way to do that. You could walk it yourself. You could hire inspectors. You could hire your property management company who has in-house people. You can just go in through, all of the units with basically an electrician and a HVAC guy and a plumber. So there really is more than one way to do the due diligence on those properties. But it's smart to go through every door, either with your team and with your property management team, and either the group that your property manager brings with them. And you might not have to pay them, or we recently lost a good amount of money on a property that we sent out the inspector ahead of time, and we didn't know that all of the windows were broken, not every window, but most of the windows were like totally trashed, and then the AC units were all messed up. There was a lot of problems. Basically, we added that up to well over $400,000, which totally killed the deal. So, we have made mistakes and just sent out an inspector, but we're doing it slightly differently now by just teaming up with the property managers, which I think is much, much easier, and let the property managers dictate, some of that stuff. And of course, our property managers are bigger companies that work on bigger units, and we try to always have a referral.
Okay, so I'm primarily, pretty much 100% in the single family world right now. Apartments interest me. I can see that sometime in the future. How are you? Okay, like most people have trouble calculating repair costs on one house, right? So how is it when you buy like 100-unit property? You're going into each door, but if you're wrong by, say you have 100 houses and you're wrong by $5,000 on a single family house, which most people are usually wrong at least $5,000, that can be huge say you're trying to negotiate over $50,000 for the purchase price, but if you're wrong on your numbers, that's $500,000. So how do y'all making sure that y'all are protecting yourselves in that situation? And are y'all running numbers individually per unit, or you're just trying to make an overall project? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, the main answer to that is that we buy for cash flow. So we are extremely conservative. That's why we only have, 2 buildings under contract right now when we put in well over 10,000, doors under LOI. So first off, they're cash flowing already. They're in a good position. They're not falling apart. They're B minus and C plus assets that have a little bit of availability for us to, work on maybe 10, 20, 30% of the properties. I personally have done a lot of rehab on, so we did like 9 fix and flips this year as well. So I do that. My background, I've owned a handyman company, a remodeling company, and I repositioned a triplex back in 2008. So I have a better handle on most of those costs than most people. But in general, I'm just saying we're not repositioning big assets. We're not going in and calculating, okay, this unit needs 50 grand, this unit needs 60 grand, Yeah. We're basically saying this unit just needs carpet, this unit just needs a fridge. And so I mean, if we're looking at stuff that needs any more than, 2,000 or 3,000 a door, like we won't even touch it, so it's much, much smaller than you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think for that. Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, like, to just take one down that's cash flowing already. It scares me when these guys are like, we're going to take down this property. It's a D-class property. We're going to, force the value up, and we're going to, I mean, it's like, man, you make a few wrong calculations on a 200 unit apartment and you go over 5. It's just like all of a sudden the numbers.
Yeah.
What type of cap rates are y'all seeing right now? I know they're going down, but you're seeing, such a surge in Texas with people moving in. I'm pretty sure that y'all are seeing vacancy rates increase, right? They're getting filled up pretty quick. There's so many people popping in here.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. So, I mean, our group, like I said, is really, really conservative. So we see the real cap rates. We see what's going on, but we put in offers what makes sense to us. So the one that's near Corpus Christi, it's a C plus asset, and the cap rates in that area for that is about 6.2. We have it at a solid 8 cap, which basically means we have about $600,000 in equity. So we're buying it at 2.7, and the value of it is around 3.3 approximately. So like we're buying it with a lot of equity. Yeah. We're buying it where we can get a really good cash on cash return of above 12%. The cap rate. My engineer looks at that stuff. So we have like an underwriter that kind of does all of the work on that. And he's a numbers guy. I'm not, but I believe it's about an 8 cap right now.
Okay. Can you kind of break down a little bit for our listeners listening right now, what an A, B, C, D. So we're talking about B class property, C class property. Some of them are like, what's going on? They kind of have an idea, but like, what are some main characteristics that distinguish these types of properties?
That's a very individualized question, because I feel like if you ask 10 people, you'd get maybe 10 answers. But in general, to us, an A class is something that's new, within the last 6 years, that has rents at the top of the market. Everything's upgraded, looks beautiful. That's to us an A class property. A B class would be something, that's 10 or 15 years old. It's it looks great, but it's just not an A. It's not an A. And then the C's, to me, are something that's newer than 1980. And then, the minuses and the pluses kind of just say, it's slightly skewing, right? So yeah. I don't know if I just have a really great definitive answer, especially because everybody, if you put your comments below, if any apartment investors listening or watching this, I swear, no matter what I say, 100 people will say I'm wrong and 2 people will say I'm right.
Well, it's hard. I mean, everybody's got their own opinion, right? Some people think going out to the Sizzler or Chili's is like high end dining, right? So it's all subjective. So what about this?
Yeah.
So I travel around a lot. I speak in a lot of different cities, and I'm going around, and it seems a lot of these cities are kind of like the old Miami drug days when there's skyrise, cranes everywhere building these huge apartments. Like in Dallas alone, there's thousands and thousands of units going on the market. What do you think this is going to do once all these properties are anywhere from 6 to maybe 18 months out from just flooding the market? Is this something that's going to help, or is this going to hurt, or what's your thoughts on that?
What city are you talking about?
So like Dallas and like all over DFW, like, Dallas is made up, I don't know, it's like 40, 50 cities with all the cities from the DFW market. And in most of the big ones, you're seeing, big apartment complexes that have been being built, started probably about two years ago.
Yeah.
And the first wave of them is coming onto the market right now. And you can see that a lot of them are going to start literally finishing in the next 6 to 12 months.
So you're talking, they're doing so many that you think that the absorption rate is going to slow down. That makes a lot of sense. If you listen to a really good podcast is the Old Capital podcast, and most of those guys are out in your area as well, in Texas. So our market research team feels strongly what they're saying is that the properties are going up, but you guys are bringing in so many freaking jobs over and over, so much construction. Everything's happening right now in Texas. They don't feel like your guys are all of a sudden in the next 5 years going to have a giant influx of open units, available units. Yep. That isn't what the case is right now.
Well, no, I agree with that.
It sounds right though. You're like, oh my gosh, these are all going to be ready, but you guys are providing so many jobs. Like, it is not even funny.
No, I actually agree with you. I just didn't know what your thoughts were on it because, even though there's so many units coming on, we have so many people flooding in. Plus, we just had, Hurricane Harvey. A lot of people are getting displaced from Houston and pushing up this way. There's just so many people coming in from all different directions. The main thing that I'm seeing is a slowdown in the higher end market and that 350 and up for the single family. But, it's like what price point, we're seeing like $2 a square foot for a lot of these apartments in some of these nicer areas, starting there. Right. So what price range are y'all looking at? Y'all looking at rents in the 600 to 800 range, 800, 1200 range, or what do you think is the opportunity right now for apartment buyers?
Yeah, that's a good question for our underwriting team. I don't know what the rents are. I only look at cap rates and go off of, what the market's saying, but I don't know what the rents are on the typical stuff. If we got it under contract, which we haven't yet, then what would typically happen is we'd put together a whole packet on that property, and we would go and sell that property basically to our investors and let them know what's going on. So basically, one of the ones we have under contract, I know everything about that property, but it's only because it passed LOI stage, it went under contract, and we're now selling it to our investors to team up with us, have equity splits. But before that, I'm not involved in knowing what is the rent in the area until we go under contract. We have such a big team that I would personally never be able to know that. We have a couple guys who do this state, a couple guys that do that state, you know what I mean? And I wish I could answer that, but I can't.
That makes sense. It's an opportunity cost loss if you're going and putting all this time, energy, and money before you have the property under control. And so what about this? Like, say you get one on, your LOI, you're talking about a letter of intent, right? So you go and you get it accepted. Now you've gone through all your due diligence. You're going to close on the property. So you have a team of individuals. Y'all are all pooling money. How is that going to structure? Y'all doing equity share, or y'all doing interest rate? Like, how would that look behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's very open, and I don't want to tie myself to one thing. But in general, most of our investors seem to really like just being on the equity side with us. So A lot of the properties will go for anywhere from on the high end. For us, we would own maybe about 50% of the deal. Our company would own about 50%. On the very, very low end, probably around our company owning about 25% of the deal. So we typically give the investor 50% or more of the deal, typically 60 or 70%, which would put us, at 40 or 50, 40 or 30 or 40% ownership of the deal, and it is based on the cash flows. So the cash flows go off of the NOI, the net operating income, which is the gross income that property makes over the year, minus all the expenses that you put in for the year, and then you have what's left over is just your NOI, and that NOI divided by the cap rate is your purchase price. So if your net operating income was $100,000 and you wanted to buy it at a 10 cap, you divide 100,000 divided by 0.1 for 10%, which goes up. In that one case, it actually is $1 million. In that one case, it's $1 million. But if you're using an 8 cap, I'm just rounding. I'm not sure because I'm not using my calculator, but it might be around 1.25 million. And if you're using a 5 cap, I already know that that's $2 million. So a 6 cap is probably 1.8 or so. And you'll just have to do it on your calculator to really understand. But that's why when I'm saying if I'm buying a 56 unit on an 8 cap with 2.7, you basically take $2.7 million, put it on your calculator, and then you multiply it by 0.08, and that's the NOI. Then if you want to know what would it be if I bought it at a 6 cap, you divide that NOI now by 0.06. That's where you get the 3.3 or whatever $1 million, like around a $600,000 equity based on the current cap rate in that area. It gets a little complicated, and it'd be easier to show, with the with the whiteboard or something.
No, I think that made sense for a lot of people listening. If it didn't make sense, guys, go back and listen to it again. So you're getting these properties. So now, say you're going to go on strike, you're going to take it down. You're raising 20% of the money, and you're getting a bank loan to leverage the other 80%, right? And you're passive. Is that how you're doing it? You're passively raising from
pretty close. Yeah, pretty close. So the loans can be 80-20 or 75-25, depending on the type of loan. And that's just for us. For other people, they might be doing 70-30 loans, but 70-30 loans just never make sense for us. So we just would never do them. But 75-25, 80-20, either of those are pretty typical for us. Even maybe if we use a HUD loan, we can do 85% and 15% down. But with that said, we don't just raise the initial amount. So this last one for 2.7 million, we put down 27 grand or whatever. So we raise that 27 grand to get reimbursed it as syndicators. We are kind of the active party in putting stuff together. And as you see, we have 8 people. Most of them work full time just doing this, and we don't get paid unless we close on something. So we call it a syndication fee or an acquisition fee that we basically charge our partners to go through all the work and the risk of putting down earnest money and to put what's called a phase 1 environmental study, to pay for the inspector. We lost money on one of the inspectors. There's a lot of costs, to keep these lights on up in here. So I mean, we do charge anywhere from around 3%, 1 to 5% of the acquisition amount, the total cost of the building. So if it's 2.7 and we do like 3%, I think that's probably like 80 grand. I don't know if they have a calculator, but it's probably something like 80 grand or 90 grand that our company will make. It'll pay back all the expenses that we're paying. It'll help keep, all of everybody working to be able to have some money so we can still do this. Because we're kind of one of the biggest teams in as far as I know, one of the top 5 biggest teams in the nation who are not, running a fund. So like when I was just in Boston with over 135 really, really active investors, everybody's blown away by, how like that we have 2 deals that meet this criteria. It's not easy to do. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and we're only able to do it because, we've got everybody in the office every day.
Yeah.
And we only get paid by commission. We only get paid once we close those deals. So.
Okay. What about like this? So most of our listeners are probably interested in apartments, but they're all single family for the most part. How do you translate when you look at like the apartment complex like that? For example, that 56 unit, kind of what was the purchase price? Did you put out option money down? Like what size option do you have to put down to control a property like that? And kind of what does it cost to pay an inspector? So people can kind of have an idea of the expenses if they attempt to go out.
Okay. Yeah, you need to be liquid pretty good to do this. We're really, really lucky because a couple of the partners that work with us are fairly liquid. So, I mean, something like what we're doing, we might have, because we work so hard, we might have earnest money in on more than 2 deals, at a time. And some of them are 27 grand and some might be $100,000 or $300,000. So we have to be able to put that money down and be able to just not have to use it for a little while. So we have lines of credit. We, use other people's money. We have a couple of investors that we're actually just returning most of their money, but they just like let us have $180,000 or close to 200 grand. They just said, here, hold on to this for a year and give me a return, so something like that really, really helps us to be able to continue to put that earnest money down. But maybe on this 2.7, just to answer your question, it's like you'll put down maybe 27 grand, or maybe they'll want a higher amount. Who knows? Then, there's phase 1 environmental studies, which is a few $1,000s. And then we have inspectors, which is a few $1,000s. So you probably want to, be probably liquid at least. If you're trying to buy apartments like we are, you probably want to be liquid, like no less than 300 grand in the bank. Yeah, in cash.
And so like, how are y'all getting out of these if you're not closing on them? Are y'all using contingency clauses or escape clauses? Or are y'all using an option and pay? And then because most of these probably you're not like having a real low percentage of the ones that you follow through and move on. So if you are putting an option up, you're losing that a lot. Is that how y'all doing it?
Yeah. So, so far out of what we've put under contract on, we probably pulled out of 1 or 2. And on those, we just, one of them was in Denver. There was a 12 unit. They advertised it at a 7.9 capitalization rate, which is nuts in Denver. So we put it under contract way before we saw the numbers. We went off of their cap rate, and we just found out that the cap rate was way, way, way off. So there's a contingency for the numbers. There's 2 contingencies. There's a loan contingency. There's a, based on the numbers that you provide us, our inspection of that, and then there's an inspection of the property. So you can get out all 3 ways, and that was very, very easy to get our earnest money back on that one. We just said, us looking at these numbers, you're really trying to sell it at like a 3.4 cap. It was half. So basically they thought a cap rate didn't involve any expenses. They were taking the gross rents and dividing it by like the full price. So, about half in all the properties that we do, it's approximately 50% expense ratio. So, based on that, they were trying to sell it for about the real price that you get in Denver, but we couldn't do it at all. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to even cash flow. It'd been a negative cash flowing property. Okay. So that's how we got out of that one. And then I'm trying to remember if we got out of another one. Yeah, there was another one that we got out of. We just lost money on the inspector. So I don't remember exactly how much it was. We didn't have them look at every deal, but it was at least a couple $1,000s that we lost there. But we got the earnest money back based on an inspection contingency, an inspection of the property. So that's how we got out of that one. Other than that, we closed on the other 3 that we put under contract so far. I'm 99% sure. I'd like to say 100% sure, but I can't see why we wouldn't close on the 16 unit that we have under contract right now, and the 56 unit. I'm pretty dang sure we're closing on that. So that's I guess, what is that? 5, 6, 7. 5 out of 7. So we close on a pretty good ratio. But the best way to get out of them is just to make sure, just like a single family, make sure you put a loan objection or a loan, because what if they all of a sudden maybe they said, yeah, we'll qualify you, but it's going to be a 70-30 loan. And that would be great if we had all the money in the world and we didn't have to worry about paying investors, a good return. Easily, we would buy it with the 70-30. Who cares, right? But the cash on cash needs to be coming through enough that we can give a decent, solid return to our partners, our equity partners.
I mean, it seems like with how hot the market is and with how many investors out there, that it's probably smart. I mean, yeah, you're going to take a few low losses and you're going to have to release these properties, but what if you didn't get it under control or lock it up, and it would have been a real good deal, because you acted slowly on it? You're going to lose a lot more money by the opportunity cost of closing on that deal. Now, the last thing I want to kind of talk to you about and ask you about is, so say someone out there goes forward and decides they're going to do this and want to buy apartments, and then, they're serious about closing on one. What type of preparation do you need on the backside, as far as what type of reserve should you keep in place for maintenance, and kind of how does that work as far as to do it safely?
Yeah, we put aside a decent amount per door, like every door, like $50 a door for every door, just that just goes into an account. And then on top of that, basically 3% of the purchase price might be a good starting. So if we buy, something for 2 point whatever million, just having, 80 grand or so sitting in that bank account for that year, on top of the capital expenditures that you're going to have to spend. So like if, let's just say you knew that you needed to do a roof, and let's call it $120,000. I'd definitely put that $120,000 aside, and then maybe another 80 grand.
Okay, cool. So how do they get a hold of you? Do you have a special website that you want to send people to, or what's the best way for people to contact you?
Sure. If you're specifically wanting to know more about the holdings company, the apartment investing company, you could go to bluespruceholdings.com. Blue, the color, spruce, the tree, and holdings.com. If you want to, listen to the podcast, again, it's realbluespruce.com, real like real estate. And then anybody can send me a personal email, adam@realbluespruce.com.
And now you're looking at deals all across the country, or specifically, so like if people are listening to this and they have a potential apartment deal, they could probably wholesale it to y'all, right, if the numbers work?
Yeah, so that's a good thing to talk about. Wholesaling for us. If somebody wholesales an apartment to us, you're talking about selling the contract.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So it is harder for people to get apartment buildings under contract, because the seller really wants a lot of stuff to be in place for them. So we can absolutely pay for your contract. But it's a bit harder we have to get creative to pay somebody, because if somebody's like brokering a deal and they don't have it under contract, and they're just saying, here, give me a 1% fee to like pass this on to you, but they never had it under contract. If they're not a broker, it's really hard for us to pay them. We want to, we would want everybody in their dog to bring us deals like that. But just get a hold of us. Get a hold of me, Adam, at realbluespruce.com if you got something. And if it passes my pre-underwriting, I'll give it to my engineer. And if it works, we'll find out the best legal way to get you paid.
Awesome, Adam. I appreciate it. You gave some great information on, how to get into the apartment business, right? So, guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Investor Army Podcast.